Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is the first episode of our podcast, India Education Show. And we have with us Partho. Partho is the educator since last 30 years. He was the founder of a bit more. How long have you been in education?
My journey started in 88, 89,
Wow.
88,
That's
87.
amazing.
Yeah.
So that's been the journey for Partho. Along the journey, he's been the head of Mirambika
Mirambika
in Delhi
for a few years, yes.
for a few years. And then he's authored many books on education and other topics, one of them being integral education, and other books on spiritual pursuits.
Yes.
How would you...
Sanatana Dharma, Vedanta.
Right. So we are going to have a conversation with Partho on some of the relevant topics that we see or face as parents, as school owners, as teachers. So, Partho, I would like to ask you one of the important questions that we all grapple with. Many of us in our adult lives tend to do things which we realize we may not love. We find ourselves occupied in vocations that perhaps are not out of choice or out of our true talents or interests. There is a lack of synchronization that we feel. And when we look back to our growing up years, there were certain factors which governed that. How do we make sure that the current generation of students or our own children, we are not making the same mistakes and setting them up on paths that we have decided rather than what is aligned with them?
Yeah, so Manu, your question will take us a bit beyond the simple question of a child's choice of what he or she wants to do in life. This will necessarily take us back to the entire framework within which schooling and education and parenting in our country take place.
Of course.
There's a whole framework in which these things are taking
there is.
place. And that framework is I call it, to begin with, utilitarian framework, where the individual child is not really seen as an individual, but is seen as more of a social component, someone whose whole purpose of life is to be useful to society.
Economically useful.
Economically useful,
socially
socially
useful.
useful. Yeah. So the framework within which let's call it the utilitarian framework within which schooling on the whole is happening is not too well disposed to letting the child decide his or her own course of being and course of work in life. Right from the moment the child steps into the schooling system, he or she is directed in a particular direction. He or she is set on a particular path.
By the parents, by the
system.
school environment, by the teachers.
See, I say system because it's a bit of a more of a system thing here. It's because the parents and the teachers are very much part of that system. The system that governs and sustains schooling itself. And parenting, to my mind, more or less is a subset of the schooling. It's not an independent thing that's happening.
Yes, I mean, there two
It very much is subservient to the schooling system. And the schooling system is subservient to the overall socio-economic system, which I'm calling the utilitarian framework.
To put it simply, utilitarianism would mean how can the child be fit in
How can he or she be useful, of utility?
economically and socially? What can
Socioeconomically,
the
yes.
system get out of the child by educating the child, as opposed to what would the child independently love to do?
So there's not even a question there of how the child can be useful. It's already determined. These things are already determined. The child is useful to society if that child serves the cause of society, which is to keep the wheel running. And this is a socioeconomic wheel. It's a wheel being fed by industrialism, by capitalism, which means products and profits.
So how do we make a cog in the wheel
Precisely.
of
How is the
capitalism?
child to be a cog in this gigantic capitalist, industrialist wheel? So how does the child serve the capitalist, industrialist agenda?
This is almost like seeing a child as a human resource, even when he's 4 years old.
See, I mean,
A
what
future human resource
what else
for
is
a
it? I mean, the moment you make
organization.
you take a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old and make him or her sit in your classroom and tell him or her what he or she has to learn, and not only what he or she has to learn, but how he or she has to learn. What else are you expecting of the child but to serve an external purpose?
Now that you put it like this, it's quite, I would say, a little bit. It can be a shocking realization
It
to
is.
see that when, in our current generation, where we have striven hard to break out of the trap of only survival through our basic needs, to wish the same upon our children, that you are just fit into the society, fit into the economy.
Yeah,
What
fit
can
in.
you
Fit
do?
in is the right phrase. So, because if you take the utilitarian framework, then you can very easily see the preconditions of standardization and conformity. Because these are the two requisites.
Do I hear a bit of the perspective on the Macaulian education residue on which the Indian education system
Yeah.
stands upon?
Yes, yes. Except there, if you go that way, then the agenda is not just industrial capitalist; it's also imperialist,
Yes.
and that's true. The Indian schooling system was very clearly designed to serve an imperialist industrialist agenda. So there you had the imperialism as an important overall purpose.
And so we're talking two things. One is how the education system generally is utilitarian in nature. And then about the Indian scenario, we're also adding the point that
The
the
colonial-
foundation has been post-colonial in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
maybe now
it served a imperialist colonial purpose of serving the British Empire in India at that time.
then what does it mean for me as a parent?
Today the
What do I
imperialism
see?
thing is not there, though what we call the post-colonial mindset very much exists. We may have won our so-called political freedom in 47, but a psychological, intellectual freedom, maybe just about beginning to touch on that. I mean, all these years, it has been a post-colonial mindset.
So that is another area that we as parents should be aware of.
Very much.
Yeah,
We
so
as
that
parents,
we can
yes,
break
very
away
much.
from it. If you could just shed a bit more light on that.
So as a parent, we first, you yourself said it in so many words, the parent has to break away from it. So if we are talking about a post-colonial mindset, or as many people refer to it as colonization of the mind, that's going on in the parents. And that's the reason it's being allowed to go on with the children the way it is, unchecked and unquestioned.
So how do I see myself?
So the
or
parent has to break out of this mindset first.
how do I become aware? I mean, a parent with a post-colonial mindset will have what?
So
Would think like
it's
how?
not just post-colonial mindset. It's post-colonial mindset. It's the utilitarian mindset.
Yes.
It's the capitalistic mindset.
Yes.
So you see, it's a mindset within a mindset within a mindset.
So before I can think about my child and the environment and what he makes of himself, first I become aware of what is my own mindset.
Yes, and how we as parents have become what we have become. See, we didn't have a choice either.
We didn't have a choice now.
In fact, for that matter, neither did our parents. So
Because
nobody
of
really
limited
had a choice.
resources, you mean?
Not
because
just
of
limited,
coming out of
the
our
mindset
independence.
itself, the framework within which we've been functioning. It hasn't allowed us freedom of choice, or even more fundamentally, freedom of being.
Yes.
For that, you have to go way further back to the Gurukul times, where freedom of being and freedom of choice was so important. Most Gurukul systems, the most important thing was freedom of being, and therefore freedom of becoming. But we lost that way back.
Hundreds of years ago, with the
Yeah, I mean,
waves of imperial
but
colonialism.
see, history is history. I mean, you cannot
Yes, that's true.
undo history or the processes of history. But the tragedy, the real tragedy has been that even after our independence, the thing has continued, has been allowed to continue. And even today, when we have a government that is definitely a government that understands the true Bharatiya values, the values and the consciousness of a true Bharatiya civilization and culture. Even today, our education system has not changed at all. I mean, there's cosmetic changes, beginnings of a cosmetic change. Then we have to go much deeper down with these changes. We have to address the radical, the root issues of this whole thing. It's not happening.
So are you saying that
Our schools are still continuing the way they were. I mean, if you go into the schools, you come out pretty depressed
yes,
because they're just factories. It's extension of the industrial system.
so you are saying that many of us are not doing what we absolutely love to do in our careers. The root of this can be traced.
No, that's a different question. I mean, I'm aware that's the question you started with. Then we digressed a bit, which perhaps is needed
Yes,
to understand
gives
this whole
us the
question
context.
of
Absolutely.
choosing what one wants to do. The most important thing behind the choice of what you would like to do, follow your true interests in life, is first of all to know what your true interest is. Do you think our schooling gives us that? Brings us in touch with our true interests, our true passions, our true loves? Because why not? That's important to understand, because from the moment you set foot in the classroom, you're expected to conform
To a structure,
system,
a rigid structure,
to a
predefined
system,
framework,
rigid,
predefined
more or
guidelines.
less. Yeah, but there's a system there.
There is a system.
And you have to follow the system. You have to fit into the system, which means conformity.
And not fitting in used to be punished
Non-conform.
harshly.
Yes, it still is. One way or the other. There's a huge psychological
Cost imposed on you if you don't fit in.
It's a huge cost. It's a huge thing that you have to know. The psychological price you have to pay for being different.
So it is more entrenched,
So let's see what it is. It is that from the moment I get into the schooling system, I'm expected to follow a system which means conformity and standardization. Standardization, one size fits all, which we know is absurd. And this is in matters of education, learning, and human growth. So that is what brings us to the other more fundamental problem, that our education system, and I don't like calling it a system, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Our education schooling system does not think of growth of consciousness at all. Where do you hear that phrase, growth of consciousness? Do you hear it in our schools?
Hardly anywhere.
In our universities?
No.
In any of our curricula? Any of our education speak that language? Growth of consciousness. Where have you heard it? You haven't.
Is that what is required to break out of, on one hand, we've got a rigid system.
So I'll make it simpler, Manu. Simple question. What is the purpose of learning at all? What is the purpose of... a deeper question is, what is the purpose of human life?
Growth.
Without going into the intricacies of philosophy, is it growth and evolution,
Knowing more
or is
today
it,
than
is
what
it
I knew yesterday?
maintaining the status quo?
I mean, I would say growth.
Yes, but utilitarianism is maintaining the status quo. You can't upset this apple cart.
Yes.
Because you have to maintain the system. You cannot be anti-establishment.
So you're making a subtle point. You're saying if we believe in to stay on the path of economic productivity as a criteria to fit into the socio-economic milieu later, then having a clearly defined structure and guideline perhaps is okay.
So it's not even economic productivity. It's more utilitarian than that.
Yes,
it is,
I was just,
I make the goods which you have to buy. That is the bottom line.
Makes it sound very
So
transactional.
I have to educate you in such a way that you buy all the things that you don't need, or that you need very little of.
Wow, yeah.
So I have to educate you. I have to train you, condition you in a way that you buy the kind of things that I make, and not just things, services, that you buy into my story, my narrative, that I tell you whether you're good looking or not, that I tell you whether you're of the right weight or not, that I tell you whether you have the right blood pressure and the right sugar content in your blood or not. I tell you everything. And I make you feel diseased at the end of the day so that you buy my medicines.
Well, this is exactly
and you,
what's
at the end of the day, you make me rich.
It's like you're talking
so
about
that
social
I
media.
have that kind of wealth to waste. Wealth is being wasted. 90+ % of the wealth of the world is just being wasted. It's not being used. When you use wealth, you use it for general welfare. You use it for universal well-being. Where is that happening? Less than 1% of the human population is getting richer and richer by the day.
So
we have to train and educate our children in such a way that they serve that agenda of that 1% of the human population.
So this is very deep-rooted systemic question for me to just ask. How
and parents
can we have
haven't asked that
children
question.
who will do what they love to do? I am literally taking on the system and questioning the system as it exists.
Yes, you're taking on a very old, very established, very deep-rooted system, and there's nothing you can do about that system.
Because the system is more interested in creating students or children who will buy more, consume
Which will
more.
First and foremost, please remember this, first and foremost, buy into their narrative. Without that, nothing else is possible. If I don't buy into your capitalist narrative, I won't do a thing to sustain it.
Yes.
Tomorrow I'll give up your corporate world and I'll farm.
Stop serving.
And then what will you do?
The
And
capitalist
I'll farm for
interests.
myself and my friends and family. I won't sell it to your markets. So I won't need to use your fertilizers. I won't need to use your insecticides and this side and that side. I won't need to compete for selling my produce in your market. I will grow it for myself, my community, immediate community. And we'll all prosper and have healthy food for
I
a
understand.
change.
Yes.
But do you let me do that? You don't. And do I want to do that? I don't want to do that because I don't think that way. Because I have been schooled for me, getting a cushy, comfortable job in a corporate machinery, which is soul killing,
Which many of us have
soul destroying
experienced.
corporate machinery. I have been trained to not only glorify it as the ideal of this life, but if I don't become part of it, I feel inferior. I feel what have I done in life? Look at my friends. They have high paying corporate jobs. It's a different story that they would be probably in pathetic health
Yes.
and totally stressed out of their skins.
Yes.
I don't see that because, again, you, the capitalist, doesn't want me to see it. It covers it up in false glamour. And again, schooling ensures that I get taken in by the false glamour. Do you see how it goes and how deep
I
it
see.
goes? It's
Thank
insidious,
you.
sir.
Yeah, this is quite becoming clear that the answer to the question
Yes.
that we began with, the first point to pause and think is about
Yes.
the need to understand the system as it is and
And
how it is geared
Yes.
against the very point that I'm questioning, that
And then-
how do I ensure my
yes.
child's happiness?
So you said
and
it's very
freedom?
important to understand the system. I agree.
Yes.
But there's a deeper thing to it. It's also very important to understand how deep the system has gone into us.
We are in the
gone
system
in-
all the time. We
And the system,
open the
and
phone
the system is in
and-
us all the time, which is more dangerous than we being in. We can walk out of the system. Will the system walk out of us? No. The system is inside us.
So every time my
Which
child is
parent-
on the
which parent,
smartphone,
Manu,
he's in the
yes,
system.
Which parent in his or her right mind will ask his or her child, how much have you scored today? Which right thinking parent will do that? Scored? How much you've scored today? So what have you learned today? Is that a question to ask at the end of the day? What you have learned today? Is that what we understand of learning? That you can quantify learning at the end of the day. What will the child say? Oh, today I've learned the 26 letters of the English alphabet. Wow, big thing achieved.
So then what is the question we should be asking as parents?
Do you feel happy? Are you feeling happy today at the end of the day, my child? A question we never ask. So what did you enjoy with your friends? Did you jump high today? Did you climb a tree? Did you play with a pup? Questions we don't ask. Did you jump into the water? Did you roll about in the mud? Did you go out for a run?
About the
don't-
experience of emotions of my child as
Yes,
opposed to
I mean,
the utilitarian.
Did you get angry today at
Approach.
anyone? Did love come to you? Were you generous?
It's almost like I am then also a part of the system when I ask the
So,
child about
my
the
my
scores.
friend wanted to have my samosa that you packed for me. So how did you feel? Did you feel like sharing with your friend? Not really. Why? Why do you not feel sharing with you? You can have hundreds of those samosas once you come home. So what happens when you ask a question like that? The focus shifts to emotions and qualities and state of your being. That generosity is something to be thought about. That why don't I want to share my samosa as something important in life? So that tomorrow I can share my wealth, I can share my resources, I can share my knowledge, because when I'm a kid, I've learned to share my cake or my samosa. But no, what is the question you asked me? Did I get 8 out of 10? 9 out of 10? Is that what life is all about? So we live, true to the capitalist tradition, capitalist utilitarian tradition, we live a quantified life. A life that has to be quantified at every step, whether it's marks or grades or the kind of money you make or the kind of bank balance you have, property, everything is quantity, quantified. How much of even knowledge? How much of knowledge do you have? How on earth do you measure knowledge? Only in terms of facts and figures? Can you measure understanding? You can't measure understanding.
So as a
Can you
parent,
measure wisdom?
you can't.
So that is the problem with us. That is what our schooling is. So now you tell me, how is a child to do what he or she loves to do? How many of us parents are doing what we love to do?
That was my starting question. That if I am not necessarily doing what I love, how do I make sure I don't make the same
Yes.
mistake with my child?
So I think you've answered your question by starting off with doing what I would love to do. And this is a question that takes us to our traditional Gurukul education, which is realizing what in Sanskrit we call swabhava. Swabhava is the essential quality of who and what you are. You know, the essence of your being. That which manifests in your life, in your mind, in your body, that is your swabhav. To be in touch with that swabhav, to know that swabhav, to honor that swabhav, to want to express that swabhav, then I will do what I love doing. But if I have no idea about my swabhav, neither I, nor my teachers, nor my parents, no one has an idea of the swabhav. So how do you expect anything to work out?
So when I say a statement like to love what you do, in our ancient culture, our traditions, our heritage, our Vedas, it is really the swabhav that I am inquiring towards.
And-
How do I know the
yes.
swabhav of my child? And with that knowledge, can I also understand my own swabhav? Am I
Or the
gathering
other way
this
around.
correctly?
If I know my swabhav, then I'll help my child to find his or her swabhav.
Right.
So in our Gurukul system, the teachers used to tell the pupils, do everything and learn to enjoy everything that you're doing. Before it came to do what you love doing, it was always learn to love whatever you're doing.
Very interesting.
And
Then
learn
I
to love
expose
everything
myself.
that you're doing. Don't just do this. Oh, I'm very good with numbers. Fine, you're good with numbers. Enjoy that. But also work with materials, which are not abstract like numbers. And I'm very good material. Then you work with numbers. I'm good with mathematics. Work with poetry. I'm very good with poetry. Work with numbers.
And why was this done?
2 or 3 reasons. One, it would expand your faculties and capacities.
Give me more spectrum of
It'll
experiences.
expand your being. 2, it'll expand the range of your interests. In our ancient education system, we had a very important word, which again is forgotten today, rasa.
Yes.
Our children were taught to experience the rasa of existence in every aspect of existence, not only this, only that. The rasa of all experience. How would that come to you? By doing everything. By solving mental
Variety of
puzzles, by
experiences.
building sandcastles, by building boats and rowing them, by running, by learning how to do archery, by martial arts, music, dance. The more you do, the more you learn, the more your being expands, the more rasa you find in life. And then our teachers, our acharyas of old, used to say, when you begin to enjoy doing everything, then you find something which you enjoy more than everything
Right.
else. Something
Absolutely.
to which you give your whole being to. Is that sense of devotion that, every true genius in his or her field has been a devotee of that field. Has it struck you? A great
Now that you say it,
scientist
yes.
is a devotee of science. Devotee,
Yes.
not a student of science.
Yes.
Every master of dance is a devotee of dance. I mean, you should hear these people speak of their vocations and passion. They would speak like a devotee. They would go into ecstasy speaking of what they do
So they give their whole self to it.
because the whole beings are in it. And then such a person comes and teaches the young ones. Imagine what's going to happen. So that is how Swabhav develops. That is how you begin to see what you're really passionate about. And then that training is given to you in doing what you're really passionate about. So by the time you pass out of the education system, in our times it used to be at the age of 25, around that, when you would transit from brahmacharya to grihast. By then you had become a master of your profession, of your interest, of your field of study. You would emerge from the Gurukul as a master. And that is on which your life as a grihast would be based. Think of that. Think how rich that system is.
Sounds
And compared to
very
that-
inspiring
See how pathetic
and narrow.
and narrow and poor our system is. Poverty of consciousness. Where does it come from? Schooling. Today, look at our society, our cultures. Poverty everywhere. In spite of the fact that, quantitatively speaking, if you think of wealth generation, we are pretty much well off today than we were so many.
Of course we are.
Yeah. But look at our consciousness. It's the opposite. Poverty of consciousness everywhere. That's why our poor devils keep talking about the device and their children. Oh, I can't get my child out of his or her fixation with device. Of course not. I mean, with that kind of poverty, what do you expect the children to? Where do you expect them to go?
When you say the poverty of consciousness, prior to that, you're saying giving the child an opportunity to engage his physical, his mental, his emotional, his spiritual, giving him a wide variety of experiences to
Yes.
engage the whole child.
Yes. Without dictating the experiences, without predetermining the experiences. That's very important.
This is how it should be to begin with.
Yes.
Whereas currently we are having a very narrow utilitarian,
Yes.
how can the child fit in, how can he become a productive resource tomorrow, what does he need to know, and how can I make sure that he grows up and consumes more of the goods and services. That sounds very, very
Yes.
narrow compared to the holistic
Right.
learning experience that both as parents and as a school we should be enabling for
Yes.
the child.
One of my most depressing experiences when I used to work with children and we were doing physics one day and we were talking about gravity, just to give you an example. And I wanted them to go to the depths of the subject, really go deep. And they said that we don't have to and we can't. Why? Because these are not the questions they're going to ask in the exam. So please don't go there. They stopped me from going to the depths of a subject because the exams wouldn't ask.
Would ask. I just need to score well, and if I don't need this to score
So
well,
why are you
should I
taking
waste
us?
my
Why are you
time?
wasting our time?
So I don't want to engage all my being into this.
Yeah, I
just
think that was one
need to
day.
score.
I still recall that was the day I probably decided inwardly not to teach again, not in this system where you have boards and board exams.
Right.
So that's the truth, unfortunate truth.
On that note, Partho, I would like to thank you for the session today. I think some key takeaways are there to answer the question of, how to make sure that the student or the child is doing what they love. The answer is not, there are layers to that answer.
There are layers, yes.
The first is understanding that we are all part of a certain system, which you helped us understand. And secondly is that what we need to enable is the ability and the opportunity to experience a wide range of learning experiences across the various parts of the child, and set him on the path to ultimately understand his or her own swabhav.
Yes.
So perhaps next time we can speak a bit more on that aspect.
Sure, absolutely. Yes.
So thank you very much for today.
And the subject where I can't even say it's been a pleasure, because it's never a pleasure to talk about this. It's always an anguish.
That's brilliant.
But things are as they are. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
You're welcome.